In just a moment, it will be my great honor to call Professor Jim Clark to the stage. There have been great educators in our state across its history. One of them has his name on a building on campus, Archibald DeBow Murphy. We offer a teacher's award, a seminar, as it were, in the summer called William F. Friday Teachers Retreats. We've been doing this for about 10 years. William F. Friday was a great educator in our state. Many of us knew him, miss him, long for his advice and counsel. In the league of truly great educators in the history of North Carolina, James Clark from Vaughan, Little Vaughan, North Carolina, is certainly one of them. Professor Clark, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. It's good to see all of you people here. I'm going to read a little formal introduction, then I'm going to become informal, and then I'll go back to formal if there's time. One of the great people in this audience said when I was coming down the hall that if my talk didn't last long enough, there was lots of booze right next door. Right next door. Thank you for attending the 2026 annual meeting of the North Caroliniana Society. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Society as a charitable nonprofit, while the United States observes its 250th birthday. Both our republic and this organization have proud heritage and legacy stories to share during these memorable, if unusual, times. Informally, I want to recall, and for the benefit of some of you in the office, work we did years ago in teaching summer writing camps for 4-H members across North Carolina. Since then, I have begun to do life writing workshops in continuing care life communities for all of the retirees and wonderful people of my generation who are living in North Carolina. I want to know, just for a feel of the situation, how many of you, and I'm going to put a little group around this so you won't be singled out too singularly, how many of you know someone who lives in a continuing care community, live in such a community yourself, or are thinking about moving to such a community? Let's see it. Now, my experience in the last 15, but almost 30 years of doing public seminars all over North Carolina would tell me that many of you, when you go into places that we call assisted living or continuing care, don't think of yourselves as ready for that. But it's got to be done. And one of the things you can do while you're wasting your time in an old folks' home is to write about the life you lived before you came there. And it has been my great honor in recent years to spend lots of time, concentrated most recently in Wake County, where I live, in life writing workshops. The secret of these workshops, it seems to me, is that you write when you are ready, wherever you are, rather than waiting to be in some forum where a person like an English teacher will stand up and tell you when to do this and don't do that and when to do the other. There's a great secret when you are free to say what you want to say, where you want to say it, when you need to say it. And I've exploited that as a volunteer. All of these groups that I've worked with, especially in Wake County, but throughout the state before that, have been formed in order to capture what life was like before Daddy came to live here. What life was like before the grandchildren said, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and all this old dark furniture, I don't want any of it. One of the fates of our time is to live in such affluence that one generation doesn't understand the welfare needs of the next. We just don't get it. And the people who write about that most persuasively are the men and women I've had the honor of working with in recent years in what I call life writing workshops. Now, the informal part of what I'm going to say is over. I have written a paper that will be printed in an imprint that will be distributed later this summer. If you don't get a copy of the imprint, we can arrange for you to get one, so don't go without one. I'm now going to resume reading from what will be in the imprint. Don't go to sleep. I have enjoyed a long career as an educator and cultural geographer in North Carolina. Years before and since my retirement in 2005 as a faculty member in the UNC system, I voluntarily taught in public lifelong learning and learning in retirement programs across our state. That informal educational interaction with citizens 55 and older began to teach me a powerful lesson. Many retirees are capable writers, alert researchers, and critical readers who welcome an opportunity to reflect upon and preserve their own personal memories and experiences, learning from and teaching their peers during the dynamic process. Rather than limiting themselves, for example, to reading and discussing in other groups the works of established authors such as Mark Twain and William Shakespeare, these adults write about and frankly discuss their own lives in a workshop program I call life writing. In this term, I include both memoir and autobiography, for life writing comprehends both a writer's very own inner or private life as well as memories of lifelong interactions with other people, places, and events. Life writers have their own stories to tell. They are having their say. I sincerely thank the North Caroliniana Society for recognizing my professional and public service both before and during my active retirement. As a volunteer, I have come to admire most especially elderly writers in Raleigh's large continuing life care and retirement communities, including the Garner Senior Center. Significantly, these men and women now spend much of the creative time and energy remaining for them in writing the penultimate or ultimate versions of their life stories. I am not referring to obituaries. With these life writers, to say it again, I have turned the lifelong learning tables. Rather than saying, let me teach you something about the life and writings of Thomas Wolfe, Bernice Kelly Harris, or Randall Keenan, I began saying to workshop participants, let me learn about your life from you and you and you. In oral and printed versions, often shared with family and friends, life writers proudly read their compositions in 2-hour workshops of no more than 12 participants. They provide each other feedback, teaching and learning from one another. Life writers are in the process of curating their own archives, their very own North Caroliniana, if you will. Often their efforts to describe and preserve their personal narratives frustrates them. The downsizing that preceded the big move from home to a senior living community, for example, inevitably included the disposal of artifacts that would be ever so useful in prompting or bolstering memory now, especially such things as old letters, family photographs, and videotapes. Moreover, few life writers have ever previously thought of themselves as writers, but in retirement, life writing becomes second nature to them. They become their own muses. They ask questions. They inspire others as well as themselves. They bond with each other by sharing recollected experiences that had been lost sight of, but have now come back into view through their open windows of memory. This metaphor for remembering, reflecting upon, and recollecting life's essence I borrow from Richard S. Kennedy's Thomas Wolfe Scholarship. The window of memory, poetry, or prose may preserve pain as well as pleasure from the recent or distant past. It is not unusual for these workshop compositions to interpret old facts in new ways, perhaps setting a family record straighter as memory changes its mind. Life writers become aware that in the next stages of life, memory may lose its mind altogether. Here let me set forth 3 principles of life writing that have established themselves during this process. First, what you write about will find you. You become your own muse and can prompt yourself, recollecting having been aroused or awakened. Initially, many life writers question this first principle. What do you mean, they ask. Wait and see, I reply. What you write about will find you. Like aromas in the ambient air, life experiences flow inward through memory's window, waiting to be written down. Second, write when you are ready. Wherever you are, follow your own sense of when your inflow of inklings through the window of memory is ready to be expressed in a poem or essay. You can share part or all of your draft text in an upcoming workshop. By sharing, you can learn how to improve your work while you may stimulate memories similar to yours in other life writers. Always remember your audience. That's the third life writing principle. For instance, are you writing about your life for your grandchildren, your new spouse, your workshop companions, or your caregiver? Keeping your audience in mind allows you to focus. To these 3 life writing principles, I add 3 corollaries. Number 1, learning to write by writing and rewriting works wonders for most writers. Number 2, teaching each other by sharing techniques and text in workshop is a good way to learn. Number 3, preserving in print or a digital file what you have written and shared brings credit to you and becomes a model for colleagues and a treasure to your intended audience, as well as to future ones. These workshop publications can include work by a single life writer or by a collection of compositions by an entire workshop. A lasting benefit of these productions, especially in residential settings, is that copies archived on site enable caregivers and professional staff, as well as doctors and nurses, to read what a resident perhaps now lost in dementia, wrote when life's daily associations and experiences were remembered clearly and written down. When we planned this afternoon, I had suggested that a long table be placed here in front of the lectern on which I would display all of the books that have accumulated in this process in the last 20 or 25 years. We overruled ourselves, but there are books aplenty coming out of these workshop programs in different institutions within our reach. I have permission to share with you 2 preserved samples of life writing by an elderly resident of Raleigh. I spoke with her yesterday morning by telephone. She's in her 90s, and in tears she said that spina bifida, being treated for one of her great-grandchildren, would detain her from coming to be with us this afternoon. She has been active in life writing workshops at Springmore and the Cardinal for well over a decade. When she moved from one life writing community to the other, she asked me to start a life writing workshop at the new place. I obliged. The title of her first story from the fall of 2021 is A Clothesline and Cucumbers. This writer graduated from Duke University in economics in the early 1950s. Hear her life writing in her own words, and my sister Betsy, who once assisted me in teaching summer writing camps for 4-H's, is going to read the story.
There is something contagious about an old story. Once it's told, it inspires others to tell their own. So it was this past week around the Cardinal in North Hills in Raleigh. Almost everyone I saw had a story about their old clotheslines. In listening to so many, another one of my own came back to me that I also want to tell. It happened when Woody and I were living in our very first apartment in Raleigh after we had married in June of 1953. As we had hoped, we started our family during that first year. An older single woman lived behind us, and she had a clear view of our outside clothesline. After she spotted the maternity top I was wearing while hanging out our laundry, she came rushing over, rang our doorbell, and thrust a large cucumber into my hand. "Here," she said, "this is the very best food for a woman in the baby way." She walked in without being invited, and she never sensed when it was time to leave. After many such days, I was feeling desperate to put an end to her visits and to the cucumbers. As a former NC State star tackle, Woody had been asked to help referee weekend high school football games that fall. So every Monday morning, his black and white striped referee shirts were hung on the outdoor clothesline after my trip from the laundromat was completed. Our nosy neighbor lady took one look at those shirts and mistook them for a prisoner's striped shirts. She made great haste to my door, without a cucumber, to express her deep sympathy and to say in the most sanctimonious voice, "Maybe this time he'll go straight now that he's soon to be a father." I played right along with her misconception. And thankfully, her cucumber visits abruptly ceased. The few times I saw her in our neighborhood afterward, I made a point to emphasize how encouraged I was that my husband was going straight this time. She always gave me a sympathetic nod. Through all the years I passed by those apartments after we bought our first home, I glanced across Fairview Road and remembered that spot and the little old lady with the cucumber in her hand for the young woman in the baby way who was married to an ex-con.
When Betsy and I were undergraduates here, we were often mistaken as twins. I'm actually older than she is. But the memory came back today that we've been in a team almost all of our lives. I'm going to read you a slight transition piece, and then she's going to read another story that you'll equally enjoy. This life writing sample is so wonderful because it is so typical, being bewildering or maddening and believable at the same time. Having recalled and having recalled and chuckled over it many a time, Woody's wily wife, the real referee, here hangs the cucumber neighbor out to dry one last time. But wonder what the cucumber neighbor will write if she has the opportunity. We are now ready for the same writer to give us another view of life, much more personal to her and her pregnancy, which produced a viable child. This piece was written in 2024 and is preserved in one of the samplers published at the Cardinal, where she was living at the time. She now lives at Hayes Barton Place, to be the third continuing care community that she's enlightened. This piece, published in 2024, was written during Easter week of 1919.
Alongside the miracle of the cross, Easter also takes me back to another miraculous Easter memory. Our 5-year-old daughter, Willow, had run a temperature hovering around 104 degrees all weekend. Despite 2 house calls from our pediatrician, Bill Farley, he had no definitive diagnosis of her illness. He worried that she may have encephalitis, a serious inflammation of the brain. Woody and I had snatched a few short naps during her time in isolation, juggling the care of a 1-year-old daughter and our son, who was age 6. When I shared our family news with my dad, he immediately drove the 90 miles between Sutton Town in Sampson County and Raleigh to check in on us. The very second he stepped inside our home, he became as motionless as a stone and appeared to have been transported back in time. "Dad, what's wrong?" I exclaimed. His expression gradually softened. He blinked his eyes and declared in a booming voice, "There are measles in this house." "Measles? Dad, our doctor has ruled out measles because Willow does not have any coptic spots inside her cheeks." But my dad continued, "Well, he's dead wrong. Spots or no spots. I remember the odor from boyhood when 7 of us children had measles in a small farmhouse. I know this smell. I guarantee you that my granddaughter has measles, and I know how to make her well." We nodded our permission. True to his nature, he rolled up his sleeves and took charge. "Go get a small glass with 1 teaspoon of bourbon diluted in 1 tablespoon of water. Bring a chair by her bed for me and put a teaspoon in the glass. She'll let me spoon all of the mixture in her mouth. In 1 hour, she will break out in measles and her fever will start to go down." Woody and I almost tripped over each other, filling Dad's demands. With watches set and high hopes, we kept vigil for that hour. We soon heard our Dad's voice ring out, "You can come in now. She's breaking out with measles and she's sweating. Her fever will soon be down and she'll begin to get well." As Easter approaches, my memory slips back in time over the past 63 years of being blessed with a precious daughter whose grandfather recalled the distinct odor of measles from his own childhood and also the remedy for them. And so we wonder, what is so much more distinct about our sense of smell than our other four senses? Scientists tell us that the distinct odors are stored in a completely separate place in our brains known as the olfactory bulb. It connects to sensory neurons. Our lasting memories of pungent, sweet, unusual, and overpowering aromas lie dormant until triggered even many years later. At a moment's notice, they're as real as our first encounter. As I've written this piece, I'm feeling almost breathless from the heavy, overpowering fragrance of blooming wisteria vines that canopied my grandmother's outdoor swing. And also the memory of her small Rockfish Presbyterian church laden with overwhelming gardenias on the end of every pew and on the altar of a boiling hot summer wedding. What aromas are you smelling from your past?
Now I'm going to tell a story that Betsy may know, but I'm not sure she will. It's from our family. From my own experience, I now illustrate a potential life-writing resource for the paternal side of my family. I am the only surviving family member who witnessed this episode. In a roundabout way, my late father was named for a woman, and I am named for him. She was his daddy's sister, Miss Willie James Clark. We called her Aunt Jim. When she sensed that she was too old to teach school and then too old to work as a seamstress or as a companion to elderly relatives and acquaintances, she retired to the home of Baptist ladies on Grove Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. Shaded in summer by huge sassafras trees, this venerable facility was actually called the Home for Baptist Women. But in my family, the resident women became ladies in the telling and retelling. Back in Warren County, North Carolina, Aunt Jim had grown up on a farm, studied music at Lewisburg College for young women, and taught in rural North Carolina public schools for many years before and after the Great War. Until her death at age 95 in February 1977, I occasionally visited Aunt Jim at her Richmond retirement home. Our visits became briefer and briefer as she grew harder and harder of hearing. She could see very well, though, so I would sit directly in front of her wheelchair. Using a pencil and a spiral notepad, I began each visit by writing out my name and our relationship. She would take the pad and examine it. Sometimes she responded with her jolly laugh, then wrote a word or two before handing the pad back to me so I could write an additional fact about my own life. She was pleased, for instance, that I was a faculty member at North Carolina State University. Our scripted dialogues always took place in the front parlor of the Home for Baptist Ladies. It was a large room as grand as the majestic sassafras trees outside. Other elderly women sat or dozed nearby us, and the more alert ones sometimes joined us in visiting with Aunt Jim, as if we were all family and I had come to see everyone. One Sunday afternoon, I was driving back to Raleigh from Washington. I waited a good while in the parlor for my elderly relative to be brought to me. I wondered if she were ill. Had the staff had to awaken her, I wondered. When Aunt Jim finally sat before me in her chair, I handed her our notepad as usual, having put my name on it. She smiled and gave it back, and I wrote a few lines of family news. She read the message but did not immediately return our pad to me. Something was different. Not wrong, just different. I waited as she looked directly at me. Her lips fluttered as she leaned forward. Eventually, as if she wanted her class to come to order, she asked in a loud voice, "Who is the student and who is the teacher here?" Aunt Jim's unexpected question acknowledged something basic about us two educators that memorable afternoon. Having long since retired from teaching, she remained a student of her own experiences. She knew that I had been teaching English at State for almost 10 years. In our different career paths, both of us had learned that teaching is the best way to master a subject by always remaining a student. I know how personally, as she knew it then, that we can be both teacher and student lifelong, especially if we are lucky enough to grow old in good health and at home with our books and devices, or in a licensed community that provides a mental and physical care facility as well as secure ones. Life writers, whatever their former careers, have been learning that lesson too. With what one elderly storyteller tells me or reads in the workshop becomes instructional to the other life writers in the room. The distinction between teacher and student changes according to who is teaching whom at the moment. "15 years before I retired in 2005, I was teaching American literature on campus at State, as well as using the agricultural extension or cooperative model to present humanities seminars all across North Carolina. Some of these seminars I conducted myself. Others I employed NCSU colleagues such as Carmen Prioli to present for me. This traditional informal educational activity was transformed by a new phenomenon that came to be called the scholarship of engagement. In short, former U.S. Commissioner of Education, Dr. Ernest Boyer, as president of the Carnegie Endowment for the Advancement of Teaching, published Scholarship Reconsidered, Priorities of the Professorate. The book came out in 1990. Traditional research and scholarship of discovery needed to be broadened and made more flexible, Dr. Boyer argued. He convinced me that public humanities scholars should engage in two-way conversations with their youth and adult audiences rather than simply extending information to them as in the customary land-grant model. Boyer said that rigorous intellectual engagement was called for. The participating citizens were not empty minds to be filled with book talk. These engaged people had important life lessons to share. In other words, what Aunt Jim had learned as a teacher in one-room public schools before World War I and the scholarship of engagement stressed the same thing. Students can be teachers as they learn from the educators who, in turn, become their students. In a transformative experience, it goes round and round. Gradually, the humanities scholar became a learner as well as a teacher, and the public citizens assumed a dual role as well. My Aunt Jim and Dr. Ernest Boyer agreed. Educators learn from our students as we teach. Have you checked your watch? Time has been moving. The North Caroliniana Society was formed 50 years ago and organized to be a support fund for expanding North Carolina's collection, the North Carolina Collection's preservation of our state's heritage in Wilson Library here at Carolina. I challenge our society, its members and friends, to add life writing and its preservation to our personal habits and programs. I'm not suggesting that you send all that stuff here to Chapel Hill. Discover in your own story what Thomas Wolfe in chapter 8 of Look Homeward Angel calls the line of life, that beautiful developing structure of language. Find or found a life writing group where you live. Share what you write about your life with your family and preserve your life writings by publishing or digitizing them. Donate a copy to your local public library. 50 years from now, students and teachers alike will be glad you wrote when you were ready. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me give you something to take to the next room with you. The woman whose two selections were read here this afternoon by Betsy said to me, well into the time that we were associated, life writing saved my life. And the more I thought about what Marie had said to me, I said that means something in at least two ways. It gave her the will to carry on, no longer fearing that her memory was dead. And it also was a preserved relic to be passed on to her family. So life writing can save your life literally and figuratively. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You honor us by allowing us to honor you. 2026 awardee of the North Caroliniana Society, Jim Claus.